We're going to be talking about Silverwolf's free-to-play team first, in a sense where we don't talk about any gacha at all, add a little bit of 4-star gacha characters, and towards the end we will also see more 5 stars in the team composition as well. In my opinion, this is a very strong unit to have, especially if you're free-to-play, and the main reason for that is because her skill, just don't bother about this wall of text. The only thing that is important is that know that she can drop a weakness in the enemy based on the typing of your team composition. So what do I mean by that? So basically, if you have a team composition of perhaps herself, you have Zealer, you have Ting Chue here, and maybe another quantum character. This is like a mono quantum team, and with her skill, you actually will be able to drop quantum weakness guaranteed in terms of like based on, of course, assuming 100% effect hit rate, you'll be able to drop quantum weakness on the enemy as well. This combos very nicely with sets like the Genius of Brilliant Stars we see here, because any character in your team will be using this set and they all get this additional defense ignore. Super efficient to farm in a sense, because one domain solves everything. The reason why she's a very strong character in that sense is, if you think about it in the game, what are the things that we are struggling with in the early to mid game, and even late game for a lot of people as well, is you need a lot of different elemental typings. You need so much resource to build so many teams. But if you have Silverwolf, a lot of the times you can just have your team composition pretty straightforward and just dropping like the weaknesses on the enemy, and you can pretty much run the team into almost any situation. So with that in mind and that context, we're going to start forming in terms of our free-to-play team. I think generally with that in mind, you want to focus your idea around like duo or mono elemental teams, and definitely the very solid pair to have with her will be a character like Ting Chue, because both of them are quantum. This allows you to already drop quantum a certain percentage of time as well, and of course the last 2 slots, ideally what you want to go for is 2 of the same element. And currently, like in terms of like the total free-to-play units, we don't really have same element. The only exception, of course, I can think of right now will be, for example, Fire MC as of the time of recording, patch 1.0, and of course Esta in terms of the last slot. So this will probably be my recommendation for a total free-to-play team to maximize the use of the skill here, where you can drop weakness into the enemy as well. This allows you to always drop either quantum weakness or fire weakness into the enemy, and you can pretty much run with this team composition. One problem with this team com, of course, is you don't really have a fire or sustain in this team composition. But for example, later on we will talk about adding more 5 stars in and how you can change this. So without Natasha, it's extremely difficult like to sustain this team. So a lot of people definitely might be thinking of, for example, either swapping Fire MC out to put Natasha here, so that you have a bit of sustain, but giving up a bit of that ability to drop in just 2 elements. But this is like a pure free-to-play team in terms if you don't have any other options as well. But one thing to note, of course, is that Ting Chue does drink quite a bit of skill points in this team. Esta also drinks quite a lot, as some of you might realize. So I would actually prefer to put Natasha here in this team composition, as Natasha does generate quite a bit of skill points for the rest of the team as well, to help a little bit with Ting Chue's energy cost, especially at very low Eidolon levels. You could swap Fire MC out and you will put a character, for example, like Su Sang in. And once we have a character like Su Sang in here together with Ting Chue, you actually have a very nice erudition character for AoE, you have a very nice single target damage dealer, and you also have a really solid Natasha in terms of physical also, and also giving you a lot of sustain. In that sense, I will probably take Esta out, put her in the second team, which you can really use Esta in most other team composition, or you could even use like other Harmony characters in your other set as well. So this is actually already a very strong like 4-star team together with Silverwolf. As you can see, she allows a lot of utility from your characters. Being able to plant physical weakness in the enemy also works extremely well together with Su Sang, because she really does like to weakness break enemies, and Silverwolf definitely gives a lot more utility in terms of the usage, in terms of her kit being centered around weakness breaking enemies, and this team definitely can weakness break enemies very easily, as you will just be dropping quantum physical, so very strong team you can play into most situations. Sustain, debuff, AoE, single target, almost a complete team if you were to ask me. Okay, and now where the fun part really comes in terms of the team composition Silverwolf cans. And this is where it starts getting a bit more complex. Many 5 stars in the team composition. Silverwolf actually excels in team composition where you have maybe one good 5 star and you want to utilize this good 5 star for every single situation. Let's start a bit in terms of like 4 of standard 5 stars, and I think one that comes to mind would be a character like Yanting. Yanting, in a sense, He has a single target damage, and you can run like Ting Che together with Yan Ting. And what this does is actually allows you to have like erudition character that is the same typing as Silver Wolf, plus a Hun class character who's like ice type element as well. In the 4th slot, you could choose another ice character here. You could run March 7th as well. Doesn't have too much AoE shielding, but does have aggro draw and a very thick shield as well. Quite solid if you want to run in terms of this slot. Of course, if you have a bit more resources, another character you could run in this slot will be like Gepard. Or Gepard, so that he's able to form a double ice team, and his thick shield is enough to shield the entire team. Very, very strong defensive character already. So this will probably be one of my recommendations if you want to run a team like that. If you want to run like a Gepard and you don't want to run Yan Ting, you will likely want to find another single target damage dealer in this slot. Of course, you could have a little bit of DPS in Silver Wolf because she's relatively offensive in a kit. So in that sense, maybe you want to consider like running Pella in this slot. If you have Gepard and maybe you wanted to run him with for example Silver Wolf, I think Pella will be an interesting pick for slot number 3. This one brings a bit more DPS in terms of Silver Wolf. She becomes more of like your sub DPS, a sub damage dealer. These two become like your AoE damage dealers, which provide a lot of damage from the remaining 3 slots. So the next team that I want to talk about, of course, will be an elaboration of the physical team. So previously we were talking mainly about, for example, Susang in the 3rd slot and together with Natasha in the last slot. One other option that we can consider in terms of the combination of characters is instead of playing Susang, we can actually run like Natasha here, and in the last slot we will run a character, for example, like Clara here. So it will start to look a little bit like this, where you have aggro draw, you have a sustain for the team, you have erudition damage, you have a bit of single target damage from Silver Wolf as well. Does quite good damage, especially if you build her very well in terms of attack. And Clara is like the aggro draw, good AoE damage, and has damage reduction in the kit, sustain from Natasha as well. So I think this is probably one of the better situations. If you are more aggressive, you could of course like run Susang here instead of Natasha, or maybe even like switch to like this, something like this, where you have like a triple physical team going into a physical weakness breaking expert together with Clara, who's like soaking up damage as well as DPS. So I think this will be like another team composition you could consider, like a triple physical into a 1 quantum as well. So those are some options available in terms if you are a Clara main and you're looking to form teams around her. And I'm just trying to touch as much as I can in terms of standard characters as well. So let's talk next in terms of Himiko. If you are running Himiko, what team? There are so many team compositions. She's just such a versatile character. But really, I think in terms of fire team compositions, the reason why it's a bit slightly tougher than other team compositions is because the only defensive character right now we have in terms of like fire will be Fire MC. And Fire MC's shield, as you guys know, is like kind of like paper thin. So those are one of like the biggest downsides in terms of running in terms of a Himiko team. Later on, for example, the upcoming Fu Xuan, who's said to be like a preservation class character, might be a very good combination of like Silver Wolf plus Fu Xuan plus maybe Asta in this slot as well. Finally, like Himiko here. So this competition for now, in a sense, doesn't really do too much in terms of a defensive ability. The team that I think is very, very doable in terms of running right now will be definitely a team like, for example, a Bailu team composition. Let's take Zila out here. Not everyone has the luxury of like pulling so many limited 5 stars, right? So I think Bailu here is extremely strong. This sets you up for a super strong team, and let me elaborate. So once you have, for example, a lightning sustain unit, means that you actually free up your slots for more offensive units, and there are way more offensive units in the game. For example, you could run Ting Yun here to give a little bit of side attack buffing, and side sub DPS potential. You can have Ting Che here as like your main AoE DPS together with Silver Wolf. So this team on its own is already very strong, but if you wanted to be even more like aggressive, you could of course swap in a limited character like Ting Yuan here to run a triple lightning team together where Ting Yun buffs Ting Yuan. She drops in lightning weakness on the enemy as well, so solid amount of DPS together with sustain as well. So this is like a very, very good hyper carry role where you can increase the utility of Ting Yuan. So a lot of people are saying that, oh, in lightning mode, Ting Yuan is not going to be very useful because he only tackles lightning, and outside of lightning content he's not going to be very useful and stuff like that. Silver Wolf settles a lot of that because of her weakness in planting skills. She fits into a hyper carry team like this quite well, as you can see. The other sustain characters that we have, of course, will be Natasha. So the only downside of running like Natasha here is generally there are no other like physical buffers as of current time of recording. So I think Bailu definitely enables Ting Yuan very, very well, if you were to ask me. But of course, that's just like one of the team compositions. You could, of course, if you are not running Ting Yuan in this slot, maybe you want to save your resources in future because you are looking for Kafka. I think this is going to be a really solid Kafka team as well in terms of triple lightning into a Silver Wolf. Or even if you don't want to run a triple lightning, you could, for example, run Kafka here together with Bailu for sustain. In your last slot here, you can run a Zealer here in terms of a single target damage, AoE damage in terms of dealing quite a lot of aerial damage over time in terms of in an AoE fashion as well. Bailu for sustain and your Silver Wolf in terms of a bit of more single target damage as well as debuffing the enemy, implanting either quantum or lightning weakness as well. I think a super solid comp. Of course, you can always run, for example, like Serval in this slot as well if you don't have any of the limited 5-star lightning characters. So those are some of my thoughts. Let me just refresh the sheet and let's talk a bit more characters. Okay, so next let's talk about Bronya, since we haven't really talked about her in terms of the team compositions for her. I think right now Bronya is in a similar situation to Himiko. We don't have a wind defensive unit or a quantum defensive unit, so it makes teams like this a little bit trickier. Which means that if you want to deviate from like a duo elemental team, you will force yourself to, for example, run Natasha in the last slot. It's still doable. I don't think it's a poor team by any means, but it does mean that you don't really utilize her overall kit. She's still strong as a debuffer, but you really want to run that duo, and that's why for now, without Fu Xuan as a quantum preservation character, or maybe a wind type defensive unit, I think it's a little bit trickier. You could run it later on, of course, or maybe if you are, for example, running Blade in the last slot, can also be done. If you are playing Blade here and maybe you have a Fu Xuan here, I'm going to just leave this top blank so that you guys who are following me through understand what this blank is for. So you can run like Fu Xuan, Silver Wolf into Blade and Bronya. This is a super expensive team, like so many 5 stars, but it's a really solid one because you have a decent amount of single target. Blade is super independent, super strong. I've already done like a team composition video on Blade, you guys can check it out as well. And Bronya really does very well in terms of like hyper carrying a particular unit, especially when your damage source comes from multiple units as well. So that's like for a win team. I think right now that's what I'm looking for. And if you're watching this in the future and you have more like win defensive units, definitely there are much more options available as well. And if you guys are finding value in this video so far, do leave a like and subscribe for more of such future content as well. And I'll be doing this every single new character that comes out, so you can always check back in the channel. I always will have these resources prepared for you as well. And let's talk about in terms of last duo team before we go into the mono team, shall we? And that team will actually be a combination of Welt and Luota. So a lot of us know that Imaginary is also a really strong element because of the slow that it provides the enemy. And running a duo like team in terms of this setup, in terms of Luota into Welt, if you have these two characters, you're very fortunate to get them, and you have the ability to spend on another limited character like Silver Wolf as well. I think this is an excellent unit. You have Sustain, who is an offensive support, the most offensive out of all of them. You have very strong AoE damage with like AoE speed down debuffing, with ability to drop weakness into either Imaginary or Quantum into any unit, and you can opt for more AoE damage in terms of Tincture if your budget is limited, or you could run Zealer if you have like unlimited budget and you can afford triple limited characters. This I think team will be really strong as well, to see like both Zealer as well as Silver Wolf into it. So a lot of the problems that Zealer is facing, for example, not being good against Quantum, Silver Wolf pairs really well with her because she does drop in Quantum weakness to allow her to become like even much more lethal. Okay, and I think out of all of the teams that Silver Wolf is good in, Mono Quantum is definitely the way to play her in terms of getting the most out of dropping Quantum weakness. As mentioned, she has a set that's very nice. You can defense ignore, she drops defense break on an occasion. You can also get additional defense breaking from the resolution shines as pearls of sweat, one of the light cones as well. Super solid. You can also turn it into like a sub DPS if you need more damage, but with Zealer and Tincture, unlikely so. Last slot here is definitely going to be Fu Xuan or any other defensive Quantum unit that comes out that is able to take on 3 offensive units as well. So very strong team. I think something that a lot of people will be working towards especially, and I think is one of the main factors that makes Zealer very attractive as a Quantum DPS because of Silver Wolf. And if you guys like such content, do check out these 2 other videos as well. You'll probably be interested in them too. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.